Welcome to Diplomatic Changemakers off the record, where diplomacy gets real. I'm your host, Wiola, bringing you unfiltered stories from top diplomats and global changemakers. If you're driven to make an impact, this is your front row seat. Welcome to Diplomatic Changemakers off the record, where we dive deep into the lives and careers of those shaping international affairs, not just through policy, but through personal resilience, unconventional choices, and sheer determination. Today's guest is the definition of an unexpected journey. How do you go from managing civil engineering projects in Morocco to leading humanitarian missions in war zones? From working on a ship, navigating the open seas, to navigating the complexities of global crisis response? From working in a construction company to advising governments on conflict, fragility, and economic recovery? That's the extraordinary path of Cyprien Fabre, my former boss, and an endlessly fascinating leader. Cyprien is now the head of Conflict, Crisis, and Fragility Unit at the OECD, where he helps governments and international donors make their responses to fragile and crisis-affected regions more effective. But his journey to this role was anything but predictable. He has spent years on the front lines, from Sudan to Lebanon, from the DRC to Kosovo, leading humanitarian missions, negotiating aid access, and witnessing firsthand the realities of conflict. His work has shaped some of the most critical reports on fragility and crisis response, including Lives in Crisis and many other analytical products. But beyond the high-level policy work, he's a storyteller, a strategist, and someone who understands that diplomacy isn't just about politics, it's about people. And outside of his work, Cyprien is a man of many passions, whether it's planting coffee seeds in his office, making flower arrangements, or designing his own clothes. His creativity extends far beyond the office. Today, we're peeling back the layers, not just of his career, but of the decisions, failures, and moments of reinvention that shaped him. His story proves that even in international organizations, there is a room for unconventional paths and unexpected profiles. Cyprien, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, you started your career in civil engineering, working on large infrastructure projects. What was the moment that made you step away from that path and into the world of humanitarian work?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a bit of an unconventional path because indeed I worked as a foreman in civil engineering work, but this was not really made for me. I worked for a couple of years in that environment and then worked on different other areas in boats or things like that. But I always was interested by the course of the world and the conflict that were happening at the time. It was in the 19th, so we were in the wars in the Balkan. And I wanted to be there at the end of the war in Bosnia. There was a lot of reconstruction efforts going on, and it was at the time where the humanitarian world was participating into this reconstruction work, and my background as civil engineer was of some use at the time. So I wanted to participate to that effort. At the time, ECHO was just created, so the European Union was starting to develop mechanisms to support the NGOs to participate to these efforts. So I started for a 6 months contract, and 6 months translated into a couple of decades, but it's the way it started.
You've worked on ships and construction and in war zones, very different settings. Were there any skills that you managed to obtain throughout your previous career that helped you maneuvering through the humanitarian affairs that is notoriously a very difficult environment to work in?
Yes, of course, because every skills you bring, you build is useful in such environments. When I started relatively young to work in large building sites, I learned to interact with large teams, with teams that are more experienced than I was at the time. So you had to build the skills to make sure that things are going well and getting where a job has to be done. And you have to gain credibility because your experience doesn't give you credibility because you are super young, but then your human skills have to give you that. And it was, of course, useful. It's still useful in the way you interact with people. So it's one of the skills that certainly I learned. And the other thing is that when you work, at least in the operations of humanitarian interventions, it's really concrete. You have an objective, you have logistics, you have security, you have all of the very concrete steps to take care of and make sure that A leads to B and then to C, and you have to plan things. It's definitely something that in the private sector, you learn a lot, because if you don't do that, your project doesn't work. So this, you bring it, of course, to the humanitarian sector as well.
So you would say that it was the soft skills and then the project management that you learn from the private sector that you
Very
in
much,
humanitarian
very
work.
much. It's quite important to have those skills rooted in the concrete operations.
So it was your pre-trial with diplomacy, actually, being able to work with so many different people. Was it international teams that you've been working with?
Oh, very much. When I started with a French NGO in Bosnia, the team lead was Bosnian, and I was a project manager in some building and reconstructing municipality schools and later buildings. So you had to manage the contractual aspect in the Bosnian systems and the relations with the European Commission, who was the main donor for that, with Germany as well, and with the German military who were cooperating on that. So you had to learn the international landscape, if you want. And it was fascinating, of course, when you are into this and learning different culture, but way of workings, then you learn even faster, because if you don't learn it, you will fail, and you don't have to fail.
Your first kind of field mission was in Bosnia, but you have also worked in Algeria before and in Morocco, right? So when you moved to Bosnia, that was your first field experience. Did you feel prepared for that at all?
No, absolutely not. At the time, there was absolutely no preparation. You just went there and managed by yourself. It's totally different now, but at the time, you dumped in a context and then you will make it work. You are part of a team and you have a team who helps you manage the thing, but that you have to make your own way and make your program work. So, no, it's certainly not prepared in that way. What is missing, but maybe not at the very beginning, but after a couple of missions, because I've been in other missions after Bosnia, I went to Burundi and other places. The lack of preparation was mainly about the political environment, because I didn't have that at all. I was very operational. I knew how to build a wall, but I didn't have a full view of what we were building, the landscape. And this is where, at some point, after a couple of years, I felt that it was missing to me, this sort of distance to understand the environment, the political environment, the economic environment in which all these conflicts or interventions happened. And this is where I went back to school and take a couple of masters, and then went back to some countries, to some operations, but more from the international organizations standpoint. But this preparation, which I think now is much better, it's much more solid. We see people who are super prepared because now you have masters on humanitarian aid. It's a bit reversed. You have people who know very well the landscape, who know very well who is doing what, but at some point you need to build a wall. So you have to do that. So it's a balance to strike to be able to navigate all that.
Absolutely. It's true that before there were no international relations degree, no humanitarian aid degrees the way that it is now. And there's so many people who have the background but no experience. And then in terms of the job market, I feel that there is also not enough jobs for people who want to do humanitarian affairs either. Although there is always a conflict and there is always a crisis when there is like a surge where suddenly there is a lot of people needed in one particular place. And this is where a lot of graduates get their first jobs as well.
Yes, and the landscape is evolving quite fast at the moment, of course, because humanitarian aid to support people suffering in crisis is important, but most of it is done by people in the communities. Nobody waits for international aid to come. It's good because it comes at scale. The power of the scale is important. But more and more, there are many discussions about localization of aid, but it's not about localization of aid. It's how we support a process that is, of course, made on different sides. From the international community, and I was part of that, we tend to overestimate or wait, and then we think that if we are not here, nothing will happen and no support will come. It's wrong. A lot of support is coming from the communities. If you go now to Ukraine, if you go now to Chad, wherever you go, the communities are the first responder. And then it's getting institutionalized, and then it needs some structure, and the international community can come to help into that. But we need to realize that we come in support to something that is existing, and we have to help, but we are not creating the support.
Was it easier for you to work in humanitarian field or to work on policy analysis and to advising government on how to do humanitarian affairs and how to deliver humanitarian aid? Because those are completely different jobs. They require a completely different set of skills, which you ordinarily acquired throughout your life. But both of these have their own set of challenges. What would you say was easier for you?
It's so different. It's a different world. When I came to the policy work, I used to say to my friend that I discovered the hidden face of the moon, the face you never see when you are into the daily work of getting stuff done and getting stuff delivered. But in fact, you realize that it's super important and it's complicated. It's really where the stress is, difficulty, it's where you are doing things. But all that cannot be done if there are no priorities set, and priorities are set by strategies, and strategies are set by policies. If you want to influence the way things are being done, you need to understand all the chain between program to priorities to strategies to policies. And when you can influence those policies, and it's a chance we have to influence and to feed the reflection of the ones who are taking decisions, then it's rooted into all this understanding of the chain between that and the concrete reality of programs. It's complicated as well because you have to make sure that what you say and what you write and what you propose is grounded in evidence and data and something solid, because you have a responsibility on that. But it's very different, of course. You don't wake up and saying, oh yeah, if I don't do that, someone will not get food or will not get drugs. So of course, it's totally different.
Which one do you prefer?
Oh, there is a time for everything, I think. I'm happy to do what I'm doing now. It's fantastic work. I really love it. But I love it because I've done before all this work. So
you have a very big baggage that you can bring to the policy analysis now.
Yes, and that makes the relevance of our message is me, but everyone in our team comes with a solid baggage. And so you are credible when you say this is probably good, or maybe there are risks with this approach, because we know what it means for the governments or for the international organizations or NGOs. We understand that.
So again, fieldwork is very important for credibility and being in these conflict zones or being in humanitarian zones that you want to help, because that allows you to make better decisions when you later join policy analysis or some of the strategic decisions that are being made on international level in international organizations, but also among the governments. If you've ever dreamt of working at the UN, EU, or NGOs, you already know it's not easy. The competition is fierce, the job market is complex, and the recruitment process, let's just say it's not always as fair and transparent as we'd like to believe. I know this because I've been there. I spent years trying to break into international organizations, facing rejections after rejections until I finally cracked the code. I worked at the UN, EU, and the OECD, and along the way, I realized something. The biggest reason so many talented people struggle isn't because they are not qualified, it's because they don't know the rules of the game. That's why I created IO Ready, International Organizations Ready, and the career coaching program for IOs and NGOs designed to give you the insider knowledge, strategies, and confidence to land your dream job in international organizations. It's a step-by-step roadmap tailored specifically to IOs and NGOs. And here is a secret most people don't realize. Getting in isn't just about qualifications. It's about strategy. I'll show you how to think like a recruiter, position yourself as the ideal candidate, and navigate the process with confidence. So if you're serious about working in international organizations, stop guessing and start strategizing. Visit www.io-ready.com to sign up now. Spots are limited, so don't wait. One of my favorite things to ask you every time is, what were you doing where you were my age and at this time of the year? I have had so many stories of Cyprien throughout the past couple of years. So I'm really curious what you did when you were 31 and it was springtime.
31. I think it was the beginning for me of my international organizations life. When I was 31 is where I finished my master's after a couple of years in humanitarian work, to have this better understanding of landscape, of the conceptual approach to conflict, to the international relations. I did a couple of masters, and then it allowed me to go to North Macedonia now in 2002 for the OSCE. My role there was to monitor the ceasefire between the government and the OCHK. and to support the Macedonian government in some of their human rights law. And our role was really to feel the appreciation of the communities about the ceasefire, about human rights issues, about many of trafficking issues. You had different laws were put in place at that time. The OSCE was tasked to support and monitor the implementation of these laws. Our work was to discuss a lot all over the places, go from a village to another and discuss with people to feel the air, if you want, and the mood of the population, see if the ceasefire was getting rooted into some reality. It's important because it's the first time I worked in a really multicultural environment. My boss was from Romania. He was a colonel from Romania. So he worked with military, with policemen, with civilians like myself. So all that was put together from all over the places, and you have to make it work. Huge learning on where to work, on see what works, what doesn't, making reports, being short and crisp if you can. So yeah, it's what I was doing at 31, I think. Yeah.
You went to the humanitarian missions in the DRC before you did your master's degree?
Yes, I've been in Africa before and after, but yes, in Africa I've been in Burundi, in DRC, and in the Republic of Congo as well for pure humanitarian work. And then after for the commission.
Why did you decide to do your master's degree since you already had the fieldwork experience in humanitarian affairs? You had your first foot in, but yet you still decided to go back to university to have that additional credibility aspect given your civil engineering background. And then that allowed you to step into international organizations from NGOs.
Yes, very much. The perception that if I didn't take steps to really understand better the political, the environment, the legal, understand better the international relations, how it worked, the history, then I would be stuck into getting food in my warehouse and out of the warehouse for all my life. I mean, there is no problem with that, but it's not what I wanted to do. So I got into the master in humanitarian relations in post-conflict reconstructions in the University of Law, and this definitely allowed me to enter the OSCE first and then the European Commission when I started after working with ECHO. You need to gain some understanding, and it really helped. You need to get that if you want to really take a real place into an international organization and be meaningful in what you say, what you do.
You have worked in quite a lot of really difficult environments, and some of the stories that you have told me off camera must have been pretty traumatic for you. How did you manage to have a balance in between living in the forest in the DRC and moving throughout all of the conflict zones and staying sane? It's a question that a lot of people asked. It's certainly something that I was asking myself when I got my job in Central African Republic, because there is absolutely zero opportunities for you to do sports or to have some of the healthy hobbies or to separate yourself from the work environment, which is what you would do if you lived in Paris or a bigger place. But in a conflict zone, you're really in the conflict zone 24/7. How did you manage with the pressure and just being surrounded by so much violence and the constant information about the conflicts and the threats to your life as well? Because I'm sure that there have been a couple of times where you saved your life or someone else saved your life.
Yes, of course, it can be difficult environments, not always. And there are moments that can be stressful, but it's not every day and all year long. But to keep a bit of sanity, first you have to make choice. So you know where you're, maybe not the first time, but if you get over the first mission or the first instance of stress, you know what you're getting into. And if you're up to it, then you can really value and you can help create an environment where you, but also your team is keeping sanity, is keeping both your international staff, but also your national staff is getting along well and keeps going on. But for international staff, usually it's relatively short-term contract, so you always have a way out if you don't feel like. And it happened a lot. I've seen many people who said, I don't want to do it anymore, and I'm leaving, and I don't renew my contract, or even I stop now. It happens, and it's good. You don't have to force yourself to get into difficult or stressful positions. I'm not sure I would do it again if it was to be done now. But then you balance your life. I have many hobbies, and so I can do. People are writing, people are reading, people are drawing. Some people are going a bit off track, and then you can keep off track. It's stressful, so you can drink a lot, but you're not obliged to do that. And it's manageable, frankly. The only thing maybe is that after a couple of years, you feel, and I felt, that if you continue, again on this sort of front line or really always the extreme. You get stuck into that and you don't know what else to do. And people in your organizations know that you are up to these contexts and they will always propose you a posting in the next conflict or in the next workplaces. And there are many people like that. It's rewarding. It's a small world, so everybody know each other, and it's always the same people that you meet, and from a context to another. So there is a risk there, and at some time, at some point, there is a moment where you say it's my time to get out of this particular aspect of humanitarian work. You can still work on humanitarian issues if you want, or do something else. Go in the private sector, go in other part of international cooperation, as I've done. But it's a choice. Then you can have a family, and then, of course, the situation is absolutely different.
So, what was the moment for you when you decided, okay, I think I'm done with this? And how did you transition from doing only field work to coming into new spaces that you haven't done before? Because it must have been also a challenge for you in terms of understanding that now you need to requalify and gain some new skills that you would be able to use in a more traditional setting. But also, how did you convince then the international organizations to give you a chance to do it?
I was working at the time for the European Commission for ECHO, which was at the time relatively small. So it was a small family and people were caring for each other. And you will know that at some point you've done 5-6 years in some places where it's hard to balance the different aspects of your life. And it's up to you to ask as well and to make sure that you are up to that. A regional posting where usually in a place that is more fit for a family life or for a more balanced life. But yeah, there is a time for everything and just ages. Time is working and you have your parents back home who are aging, so you want to be able to go in and out. You have a family, you have kids. Of course, you need a school. All these elements by themselves leads you to have a different style of work and life.
So you would say first reprioritize what's important for you, then speak to colleagues and to engage the network that you have been working directly with. Third, speak what you want to do so that you're able to have the new opportunities, and also try to pick an in-between phase, which for you was a regional office before coming to Paris, rather than straight away trying to get into really competitive places like New York or Geneva.
Yes, and take the opportunities. It's good to have a plan, but life is full of opportunities that pops up. So you have to be in a mental position to seize the opportunities. Sometimes you have opportunities, but you are not ready to take it. But sometimes you have these opportunities and you are ready to take it. So you have to take it. If you have the opportunity to go in Geneva or in New York, why not? Another thing is some specialization also. If you are super specialized in specific geographies, in the Middle East, in Eastern Africa, or wherever, or if you are super specialized in economic matters or in cash transfer or safety net, then you have a niche in an environment which is more and more competitive to some extent because you have less jobs and you will have less and less jobs for internationals on humanitarian aid at least. Then either you are the specialists that everybody wants to have or you are generalist, but then what are you adding except costs to someone who is already on the field, to someone who is Sudanese, who knows perfectly, who speaks to the people. So either you have, language skills, or you have to build something that makes you attractive. If you are not attractive, nobody's attracted.
And what would you say apart from speaking language? Because, for example, I speak Swahili, which so far has been useful in one of my jobs when I was at the EU delegation to Kenya, none of the other ones though. What other elements that would be, let's say, seductive for international organizations you could think of? You have a very particular fieldwork experience that is a selling point for a lot of things that you're doing right now. Some of the other people will have language skills. So, for example, now speaking Russian or Ukrainian is a very big thing. These are the languages that I see in so many job descriptions for so many different conflict positions at the moment for obvious reasons. What else would you say one could do?
I think that a lot of the field work, even in humanitarian aid, unless you are a doctor or you are really saving lives, and this is, of course, then there is no question, you will go wherever you want. But if not, a lot of humanitarian work is about coordinating. So the interaction, the capacity to interact and coordinate, to write reports even. I'm amazed at how much time someone who is in an NGO or in the UN agencies in a conflict area spend in front of a computer writing reports. It's part of the work. It's strange that you have to be on the site to do that. But That's the reality. So you have to have these skills which translate into a large network, and it's all about being well known. It helps to nurture your contacts and your networks and being known, because at the end I've seen many people hired by international organizations who were already on site in an NGO, for instance. It's very typical. You go in a place with an NGO, you work for a couple of months, years, and you make yourself known, appreciated by someone in the, I don't know, WFP, UNICEF, whoever, and then you will get to a job there, and then you can make your way if that's what you want. So it's a totally different work to work in an NGO and to work at the UN agency, because it's so big. It has disadvantages and advantages, of course.
So you would focus on developing the writing, reporting, publishing skills. That's one. But second is to build your reputation, because then that creates opportunities that maybe you would have not seen otherwise, or opportunities that didn't exist and were created for you because of the expertise that you've been developing.
Yeah, you talked about reputation. It's really important, of course. It's a really small world, frankly. And I'm, again, talking primarily about humanitarian, whether you are within the UN system or the NGO system. People know each other, and you go from one to another, and everybody knows everyone. So if you have a bad reputation, everybody knows, and it goes for all industries, but it's very valid here. Always have a nice
good reputation.
Yeah.
It is something that actually I tell a lot to my clients, because even for me, when I was still a student, I didn't realize that students that I'm studying with are going to be my future co-workers. For example, Julia from our team, we were in the same school, the same year, doing similar degrees. And we never thought that we're going to be working together. And that's just the beginning, because again, people who work in the same sphere, now we're talking about conflict zones, everyone knows each other, as you say. So you build that reputation, or you have a chance to build it very early on through the specializations that you have, or through the actions that you choose to take and fieldwork that you choose to do. And this is also how you build your network, right? Because you're super introverted. You hate networking, as you have explained to us many times, and yet you have a great reputation and you have a very wide network.
Having a good network is not about speaking all the time or being extrovert or introvert. It's a different style of behavior, but it doesn't imply that you have a bigger or a smaller network, because you get to work with people, and by the quality of what you do, and if you get useful, people interact with you. When you are young and you don't have yet a reputation, because you don't really know, you want to help, you want to work and help the poor and be in those contexts, it's difficult because you don't know anyone. It's always interesting to do some volunteering, even in your countries, and you have UNICEF points everywhere, you have NGOs everywhere. It's good because when I look at CVs now, and I receive many CVs, of course, for internship or work, and you make a difference between the dry CVs where people have made superb schools and masters and whatever studies, and the ones who have, on top of that, started an NGO, worked on social issues, because it reflects who you are or what you are really doing to some extent. It's not only that, of course, but at least if you've done something, if you are young, you wouldn't write in your CV that you like jogging, reading, sport, whatever, because nobody cares. But if you write that you have been participating to some social charity, puts your CV into something which is attuned to what you want to do. It doesn't mean that it's going to work, but at least it's not discarded by a dry CV with only education.
So add some extra activities and engage in some of the outside of work projects where you're able to develop some of the skills, but as you have said, have some extra visibility, start building your network, because again, very often these are the same people that you might end up working with long term. I wanted to talk about a very important topic for many people who want to join international organizations, but they don't have the background yet, or they don't have the experience. And they very often feel that they're not qualified to do the job that they really want to be doing, having an imposter syndrome and feeling like you don't deserve to be at a specific position. And I know that this is something that we spoke a lot for many years now, because you have transitioned so many times and you have reinvented yourself so many times, from being an engineer, from working on the ship, then starting a humanitarian work, then becoming a policy analyst, then becoming a team lead for a bunch of policy analysts. And I know that for you, it has been a process of really reskilling, so learning those new skills. Maybe you can talk a bit more about that, but I think it was a way for you deal with the imposter syndrome and feeling like maybe this is not a position for you?
When I came at the OECD, coming again from a very programmatic, even if I was from the donor perspective, but still I was running the world, the imposter syndrome, it was terrible. I didn't feel myself very credible. The way to circumvent that or to address that is a lot of work to ensure that the skills that are necessary in your new job, which are obviously not the same as the one in your previous job, then you go for it. And I spent nights and weekends in writing, rewriting, writing again, because this is what is needed if you work on the policy side, improving your English, things like that. But it depends where you are, of course. And then you can be a bit more relaxed with the time. But it's normal to some extent. It's sane, I hope to say, to have an imposter syndrome when you start a new job, especially when you come late and when you see all people who have the diploma, the career that goes into that line, and you come from the outside and who am I to say something? But no, you bring something as well, I think, because you are coming from the outside. So it's different. You shed a different light on things, hopefully. And then with the time, you shed the same light as everyone else. But at least you manage, you need to adjust and to work to make sure that you are credible. Yeah.
So you need to put in the work to be able to develop the skills to then feel that you're on the same level as everyone else, understanding how the system works. Because of course, you have worked for so many international organizations and so many NGOs, and every time you join is a completely new system, a completely new priorities, a completely new subject that you have been working on. So it's also difficult sometimes to maneuver. And a lot of people that I work with, they ask, how can I transition very quickly? I actually even created a program, the first 3 months in an international organization, because I realized when I was at the OECD and in other institutions that for everyone, it doesn't matter if you're junior, if you're senior, wherever you come from, it usually takes around 3 months to understand how the organization works. And there's a specific way of going about it that allows you to not only come up to speed with your skills and with what you're doing, with knowing the colleagues, with understanding not only what you're supposed to do and your team, but also the broader perspective. It's not only me or it's not only you, it's everyone who comes. It's always a new environment.
3 months because you're smart. I can take much more. It took me a year to be really attuned to understand how things work. It's good because it keeps you awake and young because you change. If tomorrow I change and go into a private sector company, it will be totally new and I will have the imposter syndrome and I will work like hell to be at ease. And it's fine because then you keep learning all the time. And if you keep learning, then you keep flying. So it's good.
And you have managed doing that very well. And
I fly.
You keep learning. You do. So now we have a phase of the world where international development, conflict, crisis, fragility are facing a lot of different issues, a lot of different pressure points. There is obviously international shift in what's going to happen in terms of how international development works, what are the priorities, how much budget there is allocated to these places. Do you think there is any point of getting into this field? A lot of people come to me now and they're stressed about the fact that they did their studies in development and now there's no jobs. There's so many people that have been fired in the recent years. So also the competition for these jobs is super high. Do you think there is a future for young people in development, crisis, fragility?
It's development cooperation or even humanitarian aid, all that is part of international relations to some extent. You will still have nations and you will still have countries who interact with each other. So in a way, you still have a need for those skills, diplomatic skills or some understanding on how those international relations works. Now, it's for sure the development cooperation will never be as it was when I started, for instance, or even a couple of years ago. It's totally different and the world has changed. And the way we think about development cooperation, even humanitarian aid, has to change. If the relations are based now on a more transactional aspect, when countries themselves want more access to EU markets, for instance, when some countries want some managing the debt rate or whatever, it needs a particular set of skills. If you want to work in IMF, the World Bank, or regional development banks, or DFI, or private sector investment funds, you have many of that. And this is probably the future of development cooperation. Humanitarian aid, which is a bit, of course, apart, you will still have, but the funds are getting scarcer and it will remain scarce. It will have to evolve as well. Gone as a way where you have international communities coming up with delivering programs. Even that is changing. So you will still have the need for an international involvement in some of these contexts, because for political reasons, for security reasons, it cannot be done locally much, much differently than before, than for my generation, for instance. For those who are doing development cooperation, I would suggest to build additional skills in economics, in data. For instance, there is a huge discussion now about the way data is processed, or I don't know, maybe one day it will be about artificial intelligence as well. It will come, and even if I don't grasp it because I'm not born with that, but it will come. It's the way it will be. But just development cooperation, a master in development cooperation will lead you nowhere.
Yeah.
If you have only that, you need to build something that in the context of development cooperation, you can bring your skills in economics, in finance, in fiscality, in anti-corruption, in human rights. You have a huge scope of work, but you should see that as part of the international cooperation in this brave new world, which is different from the one I've known.
In short, there are going to be positions that are going to be very different from what the world looks like right now and what it looked like before. It's not known what kind of jobs are going to be there, but the way that you can prepare for it is to have an additional specialization apart from international development.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, obviously, to spend an additional 5 years doing additional studies. It's skills that you can build on the spot for some of them, and really doing as you are trying to work on something, or if you have the opportunity to work in the private sector, it's really something that will bring a lot, I think, even more and more, the convergence of the private sector into development of countries. Countries develop when the private sector is investing and creating jobs, and which alleviates poverty at the end. It's not aid, it's not cooperation that brings development, but you can bring by investing, by understanding, by supporting the private sector, but also by supporting the banking sector or by supporting the international organization. So it depends of each profile. Of course, it's more economic, it's more political, it's more humanitarian or sociologists. Everything is possible. But I think that the generalist's path is only the backbone of something, but around this backbone, you need to build something to make yourself useful in particular context of international relations, or link it with the political, with the security, with stability. Everything is possible, and it's needed very much.
I think now there is a need for this multidimensional approach for anything that is done, because even through the work on fragility, which is, yes, very multidimensional, so there is a lot of different aspects to it, but we have different experts on all of those issues, on environment, on the economy, on the security side, on the political side, because all of this is extremely important. So having that multinational lens on whatever you do is also very useful and is going to take you far. What do you think about soft skills, though? Because I see that a lot of people don't have diplomatic skills in international organizations, and they actually don't go very far because of that. We talk about obviously very hard skills right now, but there is this other aspect that is extremely important in being able to maneuver the political environment that comes with working in international organizations, on NGOs. As you said, even if you were in the field, you were interacting constantly with the EU or with some of the other international donors, some of the other partner organizations, and this is also where you have learned how to maneuver through those political aspects. What do you think about that?
Soft skills are not that soft because they are to be used not only in your professional life, it's part of your being and interacting with others. So it's probably important beyond this conversation. But soft skills is really about interacting with others, so understanding the others' point of views, patience. It's not always easy, but you learn that eventually. All these are critical beyond anything else, because if you don't have them, you will have a job, you will have a place, but as you said, you might not be going very far if you're missing some of the interacting capabilities that you need to interact in an environment where the cultural differences are so big. If you work in your own country in the same cultural environment, you know exactly how to navigate that. But if you work in a very multicultural way, sometimes not always, but sometimes you need to pay attention to the way people interact with you, to the way people speak, to the way people understand things. And these are soft skills that allows you to make your way and to create your respectability and your reputation to some extent. So it's very important.
Speaking of patience, you're a boss now. How is your patience being tested as a team lead of a multicultural and multi-expert team?
It's certainly not now that my patience is tested. It was tested when I was much younger, and when you are younger, you have less patience. You think that you are right and everybody else is wrong, and then you have to make sure that things are going your way. But until you get hit sufficiently long time and hard to understand that your way is one way amongst other ways, and you have to take everything into consideration. It's a lifelong process, patience and understanding. So it's not about what I'm doing now or whoever is doing now or before, but it's a process. The earlier you understand that what you think, the way you do is your way, but you are not right because you are the boss, or you are not wrong because you are not the boss, allows to have discussion and better understanding. And I often say it's not because I don't like that it's bad. Maybe I don't like it because I don't understand it or because I see things differently, but it's perfectly understandable, and let's go for it. I don't have to like everything that we do.
You are obviously working as my boss, and for some time you're even my direct boss. So I have seen how you maneuver being a boss and how you became one. It was more of a communal decision to support the team as it was developing into a new unknown space, and you took on the responsibility of keeping the leadership within what it used to be because you were working as a policy analyst and then jumped into being a team lead. But that's, again, a completely different set of skills that you needed to know how to use, from doing policy and maneuvering the projects to maneuvering people, and also strategically position yourself within the directorate, within the whole OECD as a sphere, with other international partners, really big donors and so on. I always was really fascinated by that because you have a very unique leadership take where you focus so much on empowering others. That's the key thing of you being there. You're not only making sure that everyone is able to do their job, but you're also protecting them in the moments where that's somehow blocked or if something's developing. So you step in when it's necessary, but you leave everyone alone to do their job and to do their job in the best way that they possibly can. How did you learn that, and where this idea come from? Did you have some examples from the past of bosses like this, or is it your own unique philosophy that you have brought into the OECD?
I don't know really, but I had some leadership position quite early in my life, as I told you at the beginning, because when you work in civil engineering work, you have thousands of workers with different layers of hierarchy. Then you have to manage even younger and with people more experienced. So you know that they will deliver much better than you don't have to tell them what to do, because it will be ridiculous. Your work is not to tell them what to do and to make sure that it's done well, because they are specialists in their field. Your work is to make sure that every pieces of the puzzles is coherent one with each other and it goes somewhere. And this, in a building site, it's the way it works. You have people working on one part, and electricians, and then you have plumbers. All that has to work together. You don't have to tell you as a foreman to say to the electrician how to plug things. And it's the same everywhere. If you are in such a position, the most important is to make sure that you have the right people who know what they are doing and are willing to do that. But once you have that, it's relatively easy. The soft skills are maybe the most important, to make sure that people are relatively happy to come to work and work with each other. It's about humans, so it's always a delicate balance, and it's not about avoiding conflict or tensions or frustration. Everybody has tension, frustration. You don't have a perfect environment. As long as you have two people together, you will have tensions because nobody is perfectly attuned. But how you can overcome that, or make sure that you manage conflict, and you have trainings even within organization on how to manage that, or how you manage frustration, or how you give space for everyone to express. There are things you can do, there are things you cannot do, and it's just about striking a balance.
So you have the vision of what the final product of the whole team regarding maybe a really big production, like a report, or if it's a high-level conference, just the way that you have done not that long ago with the whole team, and then you see how everyone fits into it and let them do whatever they do.
It's not too much about I have a vision and I am a visionary leader who knows exactly where we will go in 20 years, but to have sufficient distance to know where it's going broadly and discuss that with people, because again, I'm not the one who is doing the analysis. I'm not the one writing the reports or calling the people or managing the meetings, but it all goes together. And at least it's good, I hope, for everyone in a team to be able to go to someone else and bounce back ideas and to have someone who is not in the thing. And it's now, but it was the same when I was working in different other positions. You have people who know perfectly how to build a pipeline system in a refugee camp, but at least sometimes you have to manage difficulties, or you have to make sure that it goes with pipeline, goes with the toilet system, who is managed by someone else, put people together, discuss. So it's not that complicated, I have to say, but
You're just very experienced.
I just have to make it complicated so I'm credible. I keep being credible. But no, it's the way it works. Yeah.
One of the favorite things that we did during my time at the OECD is that we had this ritual on going for coffee every Monday morning. Because, yes, I was coming to the office very early on Mondays, and Mondays was and still is my favorite day of the week. And you did too. You were there every day very early. And we started having this routine of just getting a coffee and talking about everything, sometimes about work, sometimes not related to work. So I would always ask Cyprien advice on who's supposed to pay for my broken washing machine. Is it my landlady or is it me? So there was a lot of crucial information exchange about living in France. And one of the topics that we have spoken about many times, because I had a lot of anxiety over it when I was 27, was my retirement. And I remember asking you so many times about this, because the context is, which is something that I realize is an issue for a lot of people working in international organizations, is that we work in a lot of different countries on a lot of different short-term contracts with not a lot of rights sometimes. And what ends up happening is that I was 27, I was working in 5 different countries, and in none of them I had any privileges, any retirement plans, any pensions, nothing. So I started stressing about it, and I will always ask you questions about, okay, how did you manage it? It's the same story. You have worked in so many different countries for so many different organizations. How do you prepare yourself for having a decent life if there was a prospect of you not working at the OECD until your retirement and changing your job or switching something about your life? Can you tell us some advice on how to prepare for this and what you would have done differently looking back and now knowing what the realities come with? Because this is something I didn't think about for a very long time. And then somehow, I don't know why this age, I think it's still pretty young for me to start thinking about this, but it hit me where I realized I don't really have any stability for the future apart from the savings that I can get for myself, but no support from organizations.
Yeah, no, yes, it's quite important fact, but when you are young, you don't think about retirement. It's so distant, but time flies and it goes very fast. We are in a world where nothing is secured for your whole life. You won't be in whatever organization or companies for all your life to have a saving which is secured, generating months after months. So it's not the way it works. To have a retirement plan, whatever it is, life insurance or whatever, when you are young, you cannot put that much as a saving, but as soon as you can, to put a bit aside. The way I've done it, and I started quite late, maybe around my 35 or 40s, I woke up suddenly at night and said, ooh, what happens? And because with retirement, we are getting to live longer, so we need some saving. The way I've done it, at least, is to buy properties and to rent it, because I didn't have any plan or changing for a company to another. It was difficult, but some people will buy a garage and rent it, so it's relatively cheap. But at least this generation of funds, you put it in a plan, and then you have possibility in 10 years time to buy something bigger and to rent it and have a bit of capital like that. Of course, if you are in an international organization, the retirement plans are more generous in general. So you have to take advantage of that, either to make a retirement plan or to invest into whatever you want to. But it's something that in our lives, should be not a worry, but part of the plan, part of the long-term objective. There are not that many long-term objectives in a career, because it's always broken and it goes from a place to another. But at least one long objective is to be able to live decently when you're getting older. So it's something to think about. And it's also part of the decision point. If you have a family, it's something different again, because you have additional needs and you are maybe 2 to work on that, and then maybe one will do that, the other will do that. So it's all different situations, of course, but it's something that should not be overlooked, because if you overlook it, at some point, time will come where you find yourself a bit depleted.
It's something that a lot of young people don't think about, because the moment you get your job and you stay in one country, you automatically have savings into your pension. It's built into the contracts that you have. It's normal. But then again, contracts in international organizations are completely different, where you don't have a lot of the benefits, especially on particular contracts. There is some of them that are really good, but there are more and more difficult to get. I don't only work with really young people. I also work with people who transition from other industries. These are the kinds of questions that they ask me about. What are the benefits for my children, and how can I make sure that with all of the movement that comes with working in international organizations, that my children are in appropriate schools, or what kind of life am I providing for them by choosing this career for myself? So it's a lot of conversations beyond even, do I like my work, or is the money enough, or is the context and the theme interesting for me? There's so many other aspects that a lot of people start realizing that come into play when you decide to have a career like we do.
Yes, and again, it depends from what is important for some is less important for others. I grew up floating from a country to another because my parents were moving all the time and they didn't have any pension. It was not international organization, it was local private sectors. So they didn't have much and it came very late where they could have something, but they didn't really care about what it would be for us in terms of school. We were just following and we are still alive. So you don't have to be too stressed. If you want to work in the international, if what's most important for you is school for your kids, then don't do this work. It's as simply as that. If the most important is your ability to have sort of continuity and stability, it's certainly not a domain where you should invest your career in.
Unfortunately.
It's not made for stability, but it comes with very good reward in terms of thinking, of experience, of knowledge. It's fantastic, but it's not stable at all. Let's face it.
What's one book or resource that has shaped your approach to leadership or diplomacy?
There's no one book who shaped my thinking, but some books have, like sometimes you have big moments or you learn a lot by some books, but there are a couple of them, not one in particular, and some are more guiding books on how to do presentation, how to speak in public, on this sort of things. You have that. Some are more profound, but I don't have one book who changed my life on that.
How do you maintain a work-life balance? What's your go-to hobby or activity that helps you recharge?
Everyone is different. Some people will like playing an instrument, a music instrument, or some will spend their weekend reading. When I was in field mission, as we called it, in really remote places, whether you spend a year in the deepest Congolese forest or in Darfur or whatever, the weekends can be long if you don't work. Most of the time you will work a bit, but sometimes you don't work all the time. But you have to find something to do, and I'm very curious about everything else, about the nature, about the art, the culture. So I will always find something to do, to read, to paint, to draw, to garden. Even in the desert, I will probably find some seeds to plant, which I can spend a full weekend looking at my seeds growing. And yeah. And it helps to think about something else. You cannot work and think only about work. Sometimes you are in context where you are always with the same people. In those contexts where you live in compounds, it's a bit like in a boat. You are stuck with 10 people with a very different background. Sometimes you will get along well, sometimes you will not get along well, and it's not like it's ideal world. So you have to find a space for yourself to have this work-life balance. Because you are constantly with people, which is good, but can be a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Yes, I can totally understand. And some of these skills you actually bring into work, apart from your plans, which if you have ever been to the OECD's corner where Cyprien works, you will know that there is a jungle around him with the coffee plants that he had brought from which country?
Oh, it's my director who brought it from Costa Rica.
To having a lot of different exotic elements that you're trying to grow in your habitation plant around you. But even throughout our meetings, very often we'll talk about ideas. You would draw the notes from what we're talking about, and even for some of the designs of the states of fragility, I was coordinating a lot of different communications aspects, and sometimes your responses would be literally drawing. I remember that.
Yeah, again, everyone is different. It's true that I draw a lot, which can be a bit disturbing sometimes when I'm in a meeting, even with a director, with everyone. It's not that I'm bored, on the contrary, it's my way to focus and get my hands doing stuff. But my brain is still very much into what is said, but it's a way to put my brain into a sort of creative way, creative thinking. so I can interact with what I'm hearing. So it can be perceived as, oh, I'm so bored that I will draw, but it's not. Most people now know the way I work, at least in the immediate environment, so are not shocked. I try to be a bit careful when I'm in the outside world. Yeah.
It's very unique to you, but it's also what makes you so special, because everyone knows what you as Cyprien come with. So whenever there is a meeting, whenever there is a contribution, because you're also very frank with how you respond to some of the things, you have a very particular sense of humor, and we love it. It makes you stand out among all of the other people who are very proper and are very professional in a work environment, while you sneak some of the personality bits into your work environment, and it's really wonderful. And you make people laugh a lot, because sometimes the way you put information together, I saved a couple of emails that I have received from you because they were hilarious. It's really beautiful to be able to do that.
The policy work, I find, contrarily to the private sector, is much less frank sometimes. If you work in a building company and you have something uncomfortable to say, you will not take a bend. You will go and say it, and it's frontal, it's brutal sometimes. It's the way it works and the way communication is expected to be as such. In the policy domain, I find that it's sometimes so diplomatic that you can lose the message. And being diplomatic is not about not saying things. It's about saying things in a frank way, but in a way that you don't feel hurt or you don't feel aggressed. So I try to do that. Sometimes I fail and people feel aggressed, probably. But there is no dichotomy between being frank and being diplomat. Diplomats are not here to going around the things. You have to say the things, but in a certain way that is accepted or acceptable.
Absolutely.
Even if it's frank, it can be not nice messages, but...
Looking back at your journey, is there a specific moment or decision that completely changed the trajectory of your career?
Certain moments. Oh, yeah. When you decide to have a life which is not linear, because I could have worked for the whole career I was in a big building company. It was nice. It's still a big one all over the world. Could have stayed there and make my way there. But if you decide to move and to have a fragmented life, then you know that have these moments where you say yes or no to an opportunity, as we said earlier. Whatever you say, it will change your life in different ways, and all the rest in your life will follow. Not have been here where we sit. If 25 years ago I would have taken another decision to go in this place or another place, to take these studies or not. For me, it has been mainly about going to Iraq or going to a place or accepting, okay, I go once more, I will go there. But the rest is solidifying. The more you go, the older you get. Those moments are getting rare, because all these defining moments, you take it when you are young. When you are older, when you have so much parameters to take into account, that you have less leeway if you want to take choice, because you are already engaged into a place. And it's fine as well, but it's defining moments. It's not at 45 that you take it. You can, it happens, and it happened to me as well, but most of it will probably be in a choice of life, whether it's at personal or professional level. Take it relatively young.
It's about the risk, right? When you're young, you risk only your own life, but
Absolutely.
when you have a family,
Absolutely.
when you have children, then you think about other things. And
yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. It's all about the risk. Well, you can see it in a non-risk manner, but you're right. You can do stuff that you cannot do when you are older, with different charges or things to do, or even priorities, frankly. Your priorities in life are different. 20 and then 30, at 40 and 50, it's different. And it's normal, it's good.
so you'd say that first was leaving the construction company.
First was, of deciding that I wanted to travel and deciding to work in this humanitarian work. It was not a vision one night, I want to save the world and whatever. I just came, as I told earlier, it was a 6 months project, and I wanted to get 6 months, and then I go back to my construction companies or to the boat or wherever. And then 6 months came to, okay, you have the capacity to extend and take more responsibility, and then you feel yourself comfortable in this environment. If you don't feel, and I've seen many people not comfortable at all and say, no, it's not for me, I go back to France or wherever. And now I know people who said, no, they have a very good career and they are happy and it's fine. So there is no good or right. It's just do what makes you happy and where you're comfortable. Because if you are happy and you are comfortable, you will be good. And if you are good, you will progress in terms of self-completion, possibly hierarchical as well, if it's what you want. So yeah, it's the way it works, I think.
If you could have a conversation with your younger self, just starting out in the field, what advice would you give?
Gosh, what advice, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, where I want on the fields, you jump into the water, but not really knowing the temperature of the water, the deep, the whatever, if there is rocks or not. You just go like that because you are young and adventurous and it's fun and you think it's really useful. But yeah, with distance, of course, I would have been faster into getting into some, I told you I did some masters to have this sort of environment or landscape knowledge of the international relations. I would have done that a bit earlier so that I will start to have more responsibilities maybe earlier. And yeah, I think that would be that. The rest, who am I to give some advice?
It's advice for your younger self, so you are the person.
Who am I to
advice.
give advice to myself?
Who would you like to see next on our Diplomatic Changemakers Off the Record podcast?
I think it's super interesting initiative that you took on creating this podcast series, because it gives and it has to give a broad scope of what is possible in diplomacy, or the diplomatic skills are not restricted to Ministry of Foreign Affairs and being an ambassador somewhere. The diplomatic skills are useful across the range. They are useful in life, even with your family sometimes, but they are useful professionally to humanitarian work, to development work, to all this work. You need to negotiate to make sure that there is a common understanding of situations, creates the condition where a solution can be found. And this is what is diplomatic work. Of course, it's more famous in the political and ambassador role. It epitomizes the diplomatic work, but it's not only that. So your podcast allows to put that in evidence. That is important. All that to say that you probably will have a different set of characters, different set of domain. I guess that in my case, it was really to show that an outsider could come into this work as well, even if it's not programmed for that, which is good, I think. But then someone on the security side, on the political side, will probably also be useful.
Can you name someone you admire?
Someone I admire? Oh, there are so many people I admire. There are so many people who I think would add to the understanding of what is diplomacy skills in international relations. But you have to think through, and not only to have people working on the development domain or humanitarian domain, but much broader. You can have good diplomacy even in the economic sectors, or
absolutely,
because you need to
that's
make
the
sure
plan.
that that's a plan. So I'm happy to hear that.
So you'll get a full list from you.
You
offline.
Can have a full list offline.
Okay, fantastic. That's it. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
very
taking
much.
part in our episode. It was great to learn about your unconventional journey and how you took all of the decisions, how you pivoted and learned so many new skills, and how you're thriving in your current position.
Thank you very much. I was really happy to share that with you, and I hope it will be useful for the people who look at that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Diplomatic Changemakers Off the Record. I'm Wiola, and I hope that today's conversation left you inspired and informed about the realities of international diplomacy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow changemakers. Remember, stay bold, stay diplomatic, and keep changing the world, both on and off the record.